Welcome. You're listening to The Hill by Thieves Theatre. I'm Gabriele.
I'm Nick, and we're thieves.
Right? Well, not exactly. Beginning in 1981, we called ourselves Thieves Theatre, but we didn't just do theater. We did conceptual guerrilla art projects, or what we called para-theatrical work. Our goal was to disrupt and alter the social and political status quo.
Well, not really. We just like putting sticks in anthills and seeing all the ants readjust and adapt to the new reality.
The new status quo.
The new status quo, right.
So in this podcast, we'll be highlighting the various projects that best exemplify this. In the first episode, we started to tell you about The Hill, which is mostly what this podcast is going to be focusing on. In this episode, however, we'd like to tell you a little more about ourselves, both our personal background and our 42-year creative history together, including the work that led up to the quote-unquote tipi on the hill, which is how everybody mostly referred to it. We didn't do anything with the story of the hill for 30 years. People died in horrific ways, some of them, and even though we're not directly responsible for those deaths, we certainly were a cog in the mechanism that led up to those deaths. So at that point, it ceased being an art project.
Yeah, we were basically traumatized by everything that had happened,
right.
And I even had a little psychic break at the time.
Little?
Yeah, little enough, big enough, little enough, whatever. I mean, there was a murder investigation, and grand juries were convened, and et cetera, et cetera. There was, when the dust all settled, we put our archives in the basement, and we just sort of moved on with our lives.
Right. So now, 30 years later, what was the hill, which is now a public plaza called Forsyth Plaza, replete with bike path and beautifully landscaped everything on the hill. Forsyth Plaza. And we came to realize that the story is part of New York City history, and that we're the only ones who can tell that history. We're the only ones that can tell the story of the community that was there for over 5 years before we ever even got there, and then we were there for almost 3 years. So now I was able to get my journal published. The New York Public Library bought a copy of the book. Nick wrote his side of the story in a serialized autofiction, the first chapters of which you can read on our website, thievestheatre.org. That's theater with an R-E. NYU Fales Library is going to be collecting the archives. So, now the story is out of our basement, and it's out in the world where it should be. And that was our responsibility to do that. But the work of reckoning with what it was that we did back then has really only just begun. As people and as artists, a lot of questions. And though through the work on the hill, I would say, we're compelled to look at the big picture, which includes a 42-year history between the two of us, a life lived, And does it amount to anything? Does it have any substance?
Well, yeah. I mean, a creative life, mostly in theater, but with these other guerrilla art projects. And yeah, does it amount to anything? Is it just a hill of beans or whatever?
Right.
The hill, the hill itself is almost a metaphor, both in just its name and our lives. I mean, at a certain point, our theater moved up to the hill, and then from there, it came down from the hill.
Right, as lives do. I think it's a great metaphor in general, including for Manhattan and the history of the geography, which we'll get into later, which is really fascinating.
Right.
We put our work on the Hill in historical context so that the people living there felt like they were part of something larger, right? And we'll get to that at a certain point also. But any case, these are the questions at hand, and for me, it's also important, can it be of any use to others, right?
Right. I mean, so, there's our reassessment, coming to terms with the Hill. I mean, I think that, I guess for me, I remember writing something right at the, the whole thing was still raw. I was writing something about the Hill, just reflecting on it. And I wrote that I once believed that theater had a boxing ring that sort of surrounded you and graced you. And it allowed you to take the street fight and the wars that were going on and protect it, and allowed a kind of holy catharsis. And after that, after the Hill, I came to see that no, it's not special. It's one more action you do in the world that you have to take responsibility for. There's no holy thing around it protecting it. After the tipi was torn down, the Hill was raised. Gabriele and I went and we jumped over the fence, that cyclone fence they'd put around it, and we planted a Christmas tree right at the place that Mr. Lee's hut was at, and it lived just 1 year, and then it died. And I think that sort of encapsulated what happened to our mental state as we left the Hill at that
honestly,
time.
even that was traumatic, because part of the reason we put up a tree was because we were told when we first got to the Hill, do you remember this?
Yeah.
That there was a tree once standing where we put up the teepee, and that tree got struck by lightning. And that's what allowed us to put the teepee up, because the tree was no longer there.
And I remember going, when we were preparing the floor inside the teepee, after it was already...
the roots, right?
Yeah, we found the roots of that tree,
right.
which was, something.
So even the fact that we planted this tree and it only lived for a year was kind of re-traumatizing in some ways, because we had hoped to put something more permanent from nature.
Yeah, some kind of memorial, and it never
yeah.
happened. And now the plaza is all paved over.
Yeah, and nobody even knows. It's very difficult to do anything with City Hall or the powers that be, but we really still want to work on getting a plaque or something there that doesn't gloss over the history and the people who lived and died there. It needs to be known, right? But in any case, after the Hill, we just put everything in the basement and we moved on with our lives, and we just didn't do anything for a long time and tried to recover. And then it led into a whole period of activity and productivity, where we did something called Rat Conference for 10 years. That was from 94 to 2004, approximately. And that was, the Rat Conference ended up being an important slice of alternative American theater history. And we threw ourselves in that. It was about organizing small and medium-sized theater and theater makers across the country.
Well, it was also part of our recovery from the Hill. I mean, we went back to quote unquote normal kind of theater in a way, which was organizing a lot of alternative theaters from around the country.
Right. Yeah. So in any case, what drew us together, Nick and me, in many ways, is sort of the thing that we're talking about around the edges of at the moment, which is how much of your work in the arts, in our case, theater, paratheatrical productions, is vanity, right? I mean, we live in the United States, which has a measure of success being how rich and famous are you. And it's always very difficult to escape that. There are a lot of people who, like us, who try to escape it, but it's always just sitting there. It's always sitting there. And we've always been pretty good.
I mean, pretty good. I guess it's more like we've always been trying, which means that we succeed and we fail. I think that, the thing we've looked for or thought about really was in a lot of the work is how to stay on the fringe, somewhat anonymous, and still have impact as maybe legend instead of fame, something that people don't heard about but don't quite know who created it or why it was created, but it has some kind of impact. And so we tried to stay there on the fringe where they're,
exactly
unknown but known as some kind of thing that's unknown.
right. And this difference between legend and fame is something that plays an important role between Nick and me, and how we started to understand that we're probably a pretty good team. Because okay, well, I'm going to have to go back a little bit.
Why?
Because I remember so well that we met in college, and he was a graduate student getting a degree in literature with an emphasis on creative writing at U of I Circle. And I was an actor, an undergrad in the theater department.
Right.
And when we first met, we were not in love. I wasn't. But a little while later, when I got to know him a little better, I was totally smitten, I guess, to use an old-fashioned word, because I went to college. So, I was born in Germany, grew up there for 11 years, came to the US, eventually ended up in college here, even though I said I will never marry an American. I'm going back to Germany. I wasn't supposed to stay here. My parents said we're only going to be here 2 years. I was counting the minutes, and then a lot of stuff happened, which I don't want to get into. But I was reluctantly staying here and going to college, biding my time till I went back to Germany. But then I met Nick, right? And here's somebody, I'll let you tell your own story, of course, but he had this whole history where he went to college because it was a logical next move. Not because like me, I came from a working class family. My father was a truck driver. My mother was a waitress and hostess at a steakhouse. And my brother and I were the first in the family to go to college. My mother was German, obviously an immigrant. So, the quintessential American dream is what they lived. So I was always, you're going to college, you're going to college. That was always hammered into me. It wasn't my own choice. It was just what one did until I met Nick.
Why? Because that's why I was confused when you said it was a logical next step, not for me.
No, for me.
Oh,
but that's why I started becoming attracted to you.
Oh, yeah.
Because you didn't go to college because your parents told you to. On the contrary.
No. I was a high school dropout and
delinquent.
Okay. I mean, do I need I mean, you have to tell me I was a delinquent? Of course. I'm not going to hide the fact. Yeah. So I had to go. I mean, at that time, I was a high school dropout, and I got in a lot of trouble, and I basically had to sneak around our town to, I grew up in Lockport. I had to sneak around and go to Joliet, Illinois, and sign up with the recruiter so I wouldn't go to jail. But, the Army did something good for me. It straightened me out. It was during the time of Vietnam, but I didn't go to Vietnam.
You went to?
Germany, yeah. And met my first girlfriend, who wasn't you. but
Eva.
yeah. But so when I got my GED inside the Army, and so when I got out, I had kind of transformed quite a bit, and I wanted to go to college. I started going back to where I was before I became a delinquent, and was a reader and a writer even when I was a young kid. And I went into college and started studying literature.
But what amazed me is that was not the given trajectory in your family. You were one of 6 kids, all of which dropped out of high school.
Right,
And you
yeah.
came from a family of alcoholics. Something,
Yeah,
you know.
okay. Yeah, I mean, that's all background.
No, yeah, but it's amazing because to tear yourself away from your family and say, I'm going to be the one to go to college here, you know, to me, that was a huge deal.
Well, it wasn't in my head a huge deal.
Okay, well, you were also the oldest,
progression.
so
It was easy to go. The GI Bill, they gave you money to go to school. School was paid for if you went inside your state. It was an easy thing to do. It was better than getting a job, you know.
Yeah.
And so so I went to college. By the time I met Gabriele, I had gone into graduate study at U of I, and I was finished with the graduate study, and I had written my thesis, which was an autobiography of Jesus Christ, right? And I decided to then audition,
Yes.
because I didn't know what to do with myself after I had finished my opus, you know, an autobiography of Jesus Christ, except go on stage. So I auditioned inside your department, or, you know.
Right, didn't Johnny Pasco ask you?
Oh, what are you talking? You're talking about how we met. Yeah.
Yes.
We met on stage inside the balcony. Janae's played a balcony.
Right.
And years later, I had a friend, Johnny Pasco.
Johnny Stranger.
Yeah, the escape artist from
Coney Island.
Yeah,
where we spent
guy.
a lot of time.
Great guy, yeah. And we became friends. And in that friendship, at one point, he said, "Do you remember the first time you kissed Gabriele?" And I thought back and I couldn't, you know, I was thinking, well, there must have been some kind of romantic moment or something that happened. But no, it was on stage before. We were on stage at the balcony, and I was playing Roger the Revolutionary, and you were the Revolutionary.
Yes, Chantal,
and I was also ahead of the revolution. But at that time, she didn't like me at all. And
okay,
and you know, I liked her, but
yeah,
know.
Okay.
And we kissed on stage.
Yes, and he really liked me, but you got to understand, okay? I'm at this point a suburban girl, and Circle's acting treasure.
Oh yeah. The press said that. In one article, the press
said that. But yeah, I was kind of my college and high school, but later on college acting star, you know. And Nick was writing an autobiography of Jesus Christ. He looked like Meathead from All in the Family. You know, mustache, long kind of hippie hair to here. Incredibly introverted. Your brother had also died not long before. I think that had a lot to do with it. And you were just very introverted. And, you know, I was like, okay, this is, no, sorry, not my type, right? And I found out then later, okay, so the next play after The Balcony is when things changed. The next play after that was A View from the Bridge, which my mentor, Bill Raffeld, directed. And Nick came and he auditioned, and suddenly he looked completely different. He was shaved. He looked like a 50s dad, uncle, dad, whatever, if you know View from the Bridge. And I thought, oh, wow, he does have a grip on reality. He's not insane and out of his mind. And that's when I figured out that his thesis is called An Autobiography of Jesus Christ, not The Autobiography of Jesus Christ.
I appreciate you noticing the distinction.
That
Yeah.
made all the difference for me. Okay, so in other words, his thesis was basically
Oh, yeah, by that time too, I was almost part of the theater department now because they were casting me in roles.
right.
And, so we started acting in roles together. And so out of that came Thieves Theatre. But it was after a kind of progression of little college plays that we did together.
Yes, yes, yes. We did a bunch of plays together. In fact, that year after View from the Bridge, I think we did Summer Stock. I think that
Yeah, we
coming
went to,
year.
we did the Shakespeare thing
Oh,
and Midsummer.
yes,
and then,
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, and then we went to summer camp or whatever, for that.
Summer camp, summer stock.
Yeah, summer camp for theater nerds. Right. So I was sort of becoming like all the other theater nerds that were inside the college
Right.
at that time.
Okay. And so here's one more quick story. Nick cannot play anything straight. He always has to analyze it and philosophize it and metaphysicalize everything he does. So he couldn't even do Alice in Wonderland straight. I was playing Alice, and I'm supposed to be, hop, skipping, and jumping through the forest, and everybody else is going, hoo, 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 being, waving their arms, playing trees, but Nick has to play a Japanese U. So I run past him, and he's going, hey,
Yeah, some kung fu moves,
then he also
karate,
played the March Hare, and he figured out that the March Hare. Well, you can tell.
What,
us,
I mean,
right?
a March hare is a rabbit in spring who's in heat.
Yes.
Right. That's why he called it a March hare.
Lewis Carroll.
So like a nervous kind of, but a sexual thing. So I put a little hip hop in the hips. And,
yeah, like a little Elvis hip thrust thing as he was walking.
Bill, the director, Bill said, "Okay, that's fine," and the kids loved it. They didn't know what the hell I was doing. I don't know what the parents might not have liked it, or they probably liked it too. I mean, it was an Elvis movie.
Right.
But so we did all those plays, but really we were forming our circle of people who were coming back to the balcony, because the balcony was the play that we were all behind.
Yes.
And I mean, by we, I mean Tanoosh and Chris and Morgan and Cedric, and
Deborah,
and we're all
still lifelong friends, and then after the balcony and all of that is also then how we decided our Genet aesthetic. We read a lot of Genet and Artaud and Sartre and
Sartre's book Saint Genet.
Yeah.
Right, and so we formed Thieves Theatre, but we formed it with also a production that we were going to take to Stateville in Joliet, the Stateville prison, and so we went to Stateville prison with Death Watch, and
exactly.
And we that was the first production we did as Thieves Theatre.
Yes, and that actually exactly was the first production, and sort of cemented our aesthetic in so many ways. And what was also really cool for me is I was actually getting a dual degree in criminal justice and in theater, and my criminal justice department just loved this combination of Genet and theater and my studies there. It was kind of cool because it coincidentally came together.
Yeah, so we brought workshops there, and there was a group inside the prison that we worked with who were called the con artists, or con artistes.
Artistes, yes.
Con artistes.
And Morgan McCabe was with us in Stateville doing those workshops.
Yeah, we were doing the workshops. We were all doing workshops with them, but they wanted to workshop with the women.
Yes. Morgan's and my workshops were the best attended.
And they were also trying to get letters as well.
Yeah, they wanted parole recommendations.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a good experience. And then,
by the way, I just want to say that because I say, they wanted a parole recommendation. That's not the way I meant to make it sound. What I really meant is that, of course, these people had a relationship with us, and that was my first kind of learning experience, that your actions have consequences. Let's go do a workshops and a play in a maximum security prison. Young and naive, and that naivete in some way just never fully goes away. in terms of
Well,
what?
I don't
what
know if it's quite naivete. I mean, it's a kind of bravado.
bravado.
Yeah. I mean, so that is sort of what we've done with a lot of the early shows at Thieves Theatre was a bravado. We'll get to Marat Sade, another thing, and all of them. But bravado is maybe it's a function of youth, but I'm not as enamored with the actions and the bravado that I had when I was young.
No, but it
Because
reminds.
it doesn't. It's not bravery. There's two different. You're not brave. It's bravado. You're not thinking of the consequences. With your bravado,
That's what I'm
you're,
saying.
You're not saying, oh, but what happens when I do this?
Like putting up a tipi in a shanty town.
Well,
do you know?
numerous things.
Numerous things,
Yep.
exactly.
Okay.
So then comes January, and Bill Rafeld, my mentor, encouraged me to audition for the Yale Drama School, and I did, and I got in. Big deal, right? Because now my life is going to change big time. I'm going to have to move to the East Coast. I'm being thrown on the fast track. I was very naive going to Yale. Speaking of, well, I honestly thought that it was all about art, but what Yale was and is about, which is not to say that I didn't have fantastic teachers and got amazing training, but it really is about keeping their reputation up. They need to keep churning out the Paul Newmans, the Meryl Streeps, the Angela Bassetts, the John Turturros. The latter two were in my era, and many more. Frances McDormand, on and on, right, of famous people. And it was never really where I was at. Yes and no. Again, we live in the US. You're constantly wrestling with that. And part of you, out here is like, oh, that would be cool.
Yeah.
But in your heart, you're after something different.
So we had formed Thieves Theatre before you went to Yale.
Yes.
So Thieves Theatre was always sitting there, as ours and the thing we were doing together. And you were going to the East Coast.
Yes, and we were young in our relationship, right? So, sorry.
No.
You're doing the what does Brenda call it? The RBF? Resting bitch face?
Well, no, it's not a big deal. I was talking, and I was.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
I don't know what I was saying.
Okay, then I'll continue.
Yeah, why don't you continue? You seem to know what you want to say.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking too, when you interrupted me.
Okay.
This is our whole life. Okay, now I lost my train of thought.
Of course you did.
Okay, all right. So we had to figure out if we wanted to stay together, right? I was going to go to Yale, move to New Haven, Connecticut, which I thought was bucolic New England. And Nick was trying to figure out if he's going to stay there in Illinois or follow this girl across the country that he really doesn't know all that well. Go ahead.
Well, now you're saying I can talk. Okay. Yeah, it was.
You may.
No, we were doing Thieves Theatre, and of course you got into Yale. It was a big deal for all our peers that you got in. Everybody knew what the School of Drama meant,
mm-hmm.
and how everybody was trying to get into it. In fact, friends there, Bill got a couple people in. He got Vito in before you, and then after you, Tess
Hogan,
yeah,
mm-hmm. Vito Ruginis, yeah.
Yeah, so he was the ticket in to. And of course, Bill and Thieves Theatre had nothing to do with each other. In fact, that wouldn't be Bill Raffel's aesthetic at all.
That's true. Yeah.
So there was Thieves Theatre, which was, Artaud, Genet, this kind of, somewhat radical kind of theater that we were trying to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I was enamored with it.
While you and Tanush really understood it as well. I was learning it, but it excited the hell out of me. But I didn't come to that naturally. I was drawn to it through you guys.
Yeah, so Tanush and I were going to continue regardless. But I had to decide whether I was going to stay with you and I guess keep you in Thieves Theatre too, because you're going to have a whole new life. And so after you got accepted, I applied to NYU as a playwright, not having written a play, just written my short fiction, an autobiography of Jesus Christ, but other short fiction that I'd written. And I sent in just a short story to NYU saying I want to be a playwright. And then what happened was Len Jakin was running the department then, the playwriting department at NYU. And he said, well, let me talk with you. And I don't know how we got to New York or whether we were moving you in.
I don't think so, not yet. I have a feeling that we just went there together.
To look at things.
And to talk to NYU. Schechner was also part of it, who you were excited about.
No, I wanted to work with Schechner.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got there, I saw that,
Richard Schechner, we should say, for those who don't know, who was a big deal.
Yeah,
theater history.
When I got there, I talked with Len, and Len said, "Okay, yeah, come and be a playwright."
Okay, and then now I remember. Then afterwards, our fate was decided here. We thought, okay, this is a sign from the heavens that we're supposed to be together. And we had all these plans. We were going to live in Bridgeport. Get it? Bridgeport,
Connecticut.
Halfway between New York and New Haven. That, of course, it was impossible. I had to live in New Haven. But I remember going down to Washington Square there at NYU to a phone booth and calling my mother, so excited. Mom, he got in. And my mother goes, great.
Well, she wasn't excited. No.
Of course not. There went all her hopes and dreams for her daughter, who's going to meet, a rich lawyer or somebody at Yale. Nick Fracaro is moving with her to New Haven. So now her only hope was that it wouldn't last once we were in New Haven.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put her in that category. But
come on, if you were a parent, wouldn't you feel the same?
Right. So we ended up going, and basically we went to New Haven, not to Bridgeport. We went to New Haven. We moved into Vito's apartment, I think.
Yes.
The actor that
preceded me at Yale.
Yeah, and it was just a studio apartment, whatever, and we did that for the summer. And I think I got a job as a mechanic at
Kmart.
Kmart, yeah.
They gave him a shirt that had stitched on it Tony.
Yeah, Kmart.
So I think they knew he wasn't going to last.
Yeah, well.
And I was a bartender at the time, and we moved there early to make some money before classes started.
Yeah, and so that anyway. Yeah. So we were there that summer, and I started meeting people there. And of course, I was introducing myself as going to NYU as playwright that coming fall, which I was still planning to do. We sort of met all the people there who were there in the class ahead of you and your class that were moving in that summer. And then I went and tried to find out and I saw that what the playwriting department at NYU I didn't really research it enough, but it was really an adjunct to film. So there was no sense of theater there. I had gone really thinking, well, NYU, Richard Schechner, I was reading him in the TDR, I think it was Tulane Review back then.
Tulane Drama Review.
Right. I was reading him and, what he was putting together on theater and all that with Grotowski and everything else like that seemed to fit in exactly what we were doing in Thieves Theatre. So I wanted to go. And I saw that I talked to Schechner, and I had a great talk with him, and he enjoyed my story of an autobiography of Jesus Christ, which I had written. And so I could have had a relationship with him, but it wouldn't have been, any case, I decided not to go to, and I stayed at Yale, though, that whole year, even though I went back to Chicago. But that year at Yale, I really wrote my first play.
Exactly, yes.
Right.
You wrote Traveling Light.
Which, I wrote Traveling Light, and then went back to Chicago and produced theater with Tanush.
With Tanush, right. You guys produced without me the unfortunately named Bucket of Beckett.
There's nothing unfortunate about that
Come
name.
on, Bucket of Beckett.
Yeah, it was a bucket of
Can
plays.
we show a little more respect for poor Samuel Beckett?
He's not poor, and he's dead, isn't he? Yeah. No.
Bucket of Beckett, which was Act Without Words 1 and 2, Breath, Not I, and Rockabye, which
Rockabye
we still talk about to this day. Whenever we're feeling down and need to be lifted up, or whatever, we're just cynical about life, or whatever, we go, fuck life. Rock her away.
Rock her away.
Rock her away.
Fuck life. Yeah. But I mean, it was cool. We were doing it in alternative spaces and galleries mostly. We did plays at Randolph Street Gallery, which sort of changed the trajectory of what we then were doing, because we did a swan song by Chekhov, which was a play about a actress at the end of her career, and it was only a two-hander with the other actress being a understudy.
Right.
And this gets to the heart of what we started doing, which is using reality and the fictional reality of a theater
sort
play.
Of para-theater
and
right?
Yeah, well, trying to bring the two together. So who was the woman we cast?
She was Catherine Loesch, a wonderful teacher and actress and poet who taught at U of I communications and speech.
So she was later. It was later in her career. In fact, she hadn't acted for years, and she was just a teacher.
Yes.
And we asked her to do the swan song, and then Morgan was going to be the understudy.
Morgan McCabe was going to be the understudy.
But instead, what happened was she got on stage and she couldn't memorize her lines, and she was very upset about that. But she stuck it out, and she went to every night of the performance and came on stage and started saying the lines, and then Morgan just took over as understudy.
Right, which was brilliant. I mean, it worked out amazingly when you take what life hands you, and it becomes a better work of art, right?
Yeah, but the thing with that, just the Randolph Street Gallery, what happened was that I had written the play then, and Tanush wanted to direct it, and he directed it at another place in Chicago, WPA. I forgot what that performance space was exactly, but he did the play there. And at the time, we got an email, I think, from ABC No Rio, or no, from Randolph Street Gallery.
Yes,
saying that
an email. This was
well,
way before email.
Yeah, that was an email, a phone call or something. But anyway, Randolph Street Gallery said that they were that ABC No Rio. Randolph Street Gallery became a kind of prominent gallery in the alternative gallery scene, as did No Rio.
And they had a relationship with No Rio, and this is how we got to New York, actually, with your play.
Right, and No Rio said they give $500.
Oh my God, we're so proud of that to this day.
Yeah, because No Rio, I mean, back in 1982 or whatever it was, I mean, $500 from an alternative. But anyway, to bring us to New York, they wanted to bring Thieves Theatre. They didn't necessarily want to bring my play, but they liked the idea of Thieves Theatre because they had stolen. If you don't know about No Rio, it's a very interesting story.
Yes, ABC No Rio exists to this day, and it's a legendary space here in New York. They came into prominence with something called the Real Estate Show, which is back in the late 70s, I guess it was.
No, 1980.
80, okay. They, quote, stole a building. They squatted in a building in New York City and got a lot of attention for it when the city tried to throw them out. A lot of people, there were a lot of squatters of all kinds back then. And
but they had brought like a celebrity artist.
Yes, a lot of celebrity.
Joseph Boys.
Mary Baraka.
Yeah.
So in any case, they the city then gave them a building on Rivington Street, and I think they're right now renovating it, but they're still
Yeah, they're in
there.
exile now, and
Yes.
and the building's being renovated.
But they're still there to this day.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, anyway, so we brought, what we did was, it was sort of funny. We bought a paddy wagon,
Yes, a Chicago paddy wagon.
a Chicago City Police paddy wagon, big steel monstrosity, and we packed that up. And then I had a van. We packed the van up, and we took all the set. The set was really cool, and we brought it to New York, and we parked the paddy wagon outside of No Real. Slept inside the building. There was a bathhouse on First Avenue near Rivington, I think between Rivington and Delancey. There was a bathhouse there, and stayed at No Real. I'd sneak out and go up to New Haven quite often and stay with Gabriele.
I'm just saying it wouldn't be First Avenue because it's below us, and so it would be like
Whatever avenue it is, come on, whatever it is. It's about 3 blocks
Allen
away.
Street or something.
Allen Street, yeah. So anyway, so we were sitting there inside No Rio, and the van was parked right out front, and everybody said, well, you should hire a graffiti artist around to to have him graffiti the van
so that it doesn't get graffitied.
No. So it doesn't. So it's protected,
That's
which
what
is
I
true.
mean.
I mean, not just broken into or whatever.
Yeah,
People would just destroy it, and so it just was sitting out front of No Rio, and it got a nice little art put on it, and so that was No Rio, which we developed a relationship with, and then from there we moved. We moved back to Chicago. Tanush and I. Tanush went up to Toronto, and I sort of followed him up to Toronto. You went up there and started working with Thieves Theatre too in your summers when you were outside of
classes.
But we sort of basically followed Tanush up to Toronto and started doing the theater in Toronto.
Exactly. Do we talk about Murat Saad now, or?
Well, I mean, what we were doing theater in Toronto. First of all, we said, "Wow, all the attention you get for doing our fringe theater
up in Toronto." It was so exciting to have theater in Toronto.
Yeah, to actually have press interested in what you were doing.
Money.
Well, yeah.
If you did anything related to Canadiana,
you had money. We weren't doing Canadiana, but I mean, the point is that there was a lot of money for. Theater was in Toronto seemed much more respected in so many different ways by the press and everything else.
Do we want to talk about Murat Saad now?
No. Let's go into that because it's a big deal. Let's go
next episode.
Next episode,
okay.
We should talk about Murat Saad because that really is another pivotal point inside the theater.
Yeah, there are 2 more pivotal points that have a direct connection to the Hill and how we were proceeded. Okay, thanks for listening, guys. Again, you can find out a lot more at thievestheater.org. That's theater with an R-E.
And you can follow us on Instagram and
Twitter
at Tipi on the Hill.
TIPI on the Hill. All right. Till next time. Thank you.
Bye.